Hi everyone, welcome to our PlantPure kitchen. I'm Kim Campbell and we're live tonight in Mebane, North Carolina. We go live every Thursday night at 6:30, so we'd love to have you join us. The more the merrier. We've been doing this since early in the pandemic and we're trying to get everybody to cook along with us and have everything prepped and ready to go. Last week we had a taped show, which was a lot of fun because I was in the chat box. We actually busted out of North Carolina and went to upstate New York to see my family because it's been a long time. So we're back and we're ready to start cooking, and tonight I'm making something really fun. I'm making Beanie Loaf, which is an all-American sort of classic dish made after meatloaf. And when I was a kid I used to like meatloaf. And I like this actually better than meatloaf. So it comes from the PlantPure Nation cookbook, comes out of this cookbook. It's on page 178. I will tell you, if you're following along using the cookbook, I'm going to do things a little different tonight. I always tend to make my recipes easier as I go along and I learn a few tricks. So this recipe has a lot of vegetables and it's all going to go in the food processor. We're not going to do anything over the stove today. We're just going to use this processor and create the meatloaf that way. But before I get started into the recipe, I wanted to mention that tonight we were hoping to have Nelson's father here, Dr. Campbell, because he is actually going to be taping a series of a course for PlantPure, and so he's coming down here on Sunday. He will be here next Thursday for PlantPure Kitchen Live. So if you have pressing questions you want to ask him, he will be sitting right next to me answering your questions. So I hope that you'll join us next Thursday. Nelson, did you want to say anything about what your father's doing?
Yeah, so he's going to be here for probably most, if not all, of next week, and we're going to be filming seminars. He has put together a 9-part seminar series, and I'm going to participate as well. I'm going to do an intro session and then an ending session, but it's going to be called Nutrition in a Pandemic. And what he's going to do is he's going to start out making a case for plant-based nutrition and also talking about the history of nutrition and where we went wrong. But the whole thing culminates in a really exciting seminar session where he's going to be talking about the connection of nutrition to viral immunity. And he's going to be sharing some information that has not been shared out there before. He's also going to be drawing from his own research and data from China to talk about this. So it's actually a very provocative series, and so we're filming it next week, and we should be in a position to launch it after doing some post-production editing in November at some point. If you're interested, go to opentribe.com, click on the courses tab, and register so you get on our email list, because we'll be emailing details to people who are interested later in the month.
I'm just going to add my 2 cents about OpenTribe. It's very user-friendly. I think just going on and playing around and getting really comfortable with it, it's not difficult to use. So go to opentribe.com, set your pod up if you're a pod leader, and I've already set my pod up in there, and it's actually very easy to use.
And again, you can through the food project that's on the platform, you can actually interact directly with Kim if you have questions or thoughts or ideas, and you can interact with one another.
Right. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So this recipe, there's 2 parts to it. There's a sauce on top that's, you remember your mom used to put ketchup over the top of a meatloaf. We're going to do a little sweet sort of tomatoey sauce tonight, and then we're going to make the meatloaf. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. I'm going to use a half of a cup of ketchup. I would be very careful when you're buying ketchups to make sure that it doesn't have high fructose corn syrup. That's the first thing. And then, minimal salt and sugars. And if you're really into, I actually got this one. I got Annie's Organic. If you're really into making your own and controlling what goes into your condiments, you can certainly make your own ketchup. It's not hard to do. You can use tomato paste and vinegar, a little bit of sugar, sometimes not a lot of sugar, maple syrup. Actually, there's this book, and I want to share it with you. It's called The Homemade Vegan Pantry, and Miyoko Shinner wrote this book. I love this book. She has so many staple items like ketchup and mayonnaise and mustards and just all sorts of things, and she actually has a recipe in here for ketchup. And I have this dog-tailed all over the place, but if you don't know about this book, you might want to grab it because it's, to me, one of my nicest books I have on my shelf. Miyoko Shinner, Homemade Vegan Pantry. All right, so then we're going to add some molasses, and I believe it calls for 2 tablespoons of molasses. You can cut back on that if you want. It's going to go on top, so it's, if you don't want it that sweet, you can change that. And then I'm using a little bit of Dijon mustard, 1 tablespoon. You could use a regular mustard if you want. I just happen to like Dijon mustard. And then some chili powder, about a teaspoon of chili powder. And then a little bit of water. I think I have here a quarter of a cup of water just to thin it out a little bit. You can thin it out as much as you want. If you really want to cheat and you don't want to go through this whole process of making a glaze, you can buy your own topping. The bone-sucking sauce, I've used this for the Beanie Loaf many times, and it works, and I really like the bone-sucking sauce. I always keep that in my refrigerator.
Although it has an awful name.
Yeah, it does kind of have a funny name, but you don't forget it, that's for sure. So every time I do a recipe, I always have to tell you a little bit about the history of a recipe. And meatloaf came to America via the Germans. They actually used, I believe it was pork and organ meats, and they put cornmeal in it, and that was their meatloaf. Now, when Germans make meatloaf, they actually put a hard-boiled egg in the middle. But it's been around forever. During the Great Depression, after they discovered meat grinders, that's when people really got into a lot of hamburger-style recipes. All right, so I'm going to move this around. So what we're going to use here for the meatloaf, the center of it, we're going to use the base is chickpeas. I really like chickpeas for a beanie loaf. Some people like lentils. Lentils are just a little too soft for me, so I recommend chickpeas. I have played around with so many different meatloafs, and this is the one that is my favorite, and we did it during Jump Starts, and it was really popular. I'm going to use, I believe it's walnuts, a half a cup of walnuts. Is it a half a cup? 3/4 of a cup of walnuts, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to use flax meal. So what you want to do with the flax meal is you want to add a little bit of water to it. You want to make a flax egg. And I think it was 3 tablespoons of flax meal. And then just mix it up a little bit. That's going to be your egg, and you're going to add that in at the very end. I like flax meal for this recipe. You could use chia seeds. You could even use aquafaba, which is the juice that comes from the can of chickpeas, or the water that comes from the chickpeas when you cook it in your Instant Pot. All right, so we'll let that sit there, and that'll get really, really thick. And then I'm going to bring this over here since we're not using a stove. This is a really nice recipe for Thanksgiving. It can be your centerpiece. It's a good time to practice to see if you like it, because I think it makes a great Thanksgiving. It almost feels like a stuffing too, because it's got a lot of just nuts and bread in it. So we'll start with the dry ingredients. So I'm going to put my bread. in the food processor. You can use breadcrumbs if you want, but this is so much easier. Just get yourself a whole grain bread. If you're gluten-free, you can use corn flakes, you can use Cheerios, you can use a gluten-free bread, anything. So put that in there. And then we're going to add oats, 1 cup of dry oats. Don't use instant oats, use regular oats. And then 3/4 of a cup of walnuts, and you stop at that point. You want to get it ground really, really down to a fine meal. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. All right, so I put the oats and the walnuts and the bread in here, and the consistency I got is just like this. It's just like breadcrumbs almost. It's really fine, and you want it fine. You don't want it really thick and chunky. All right, so then while I was waiting, I went ahead and cut up my carrot roughly. You don't need to cut them and dice them or anything. Just cut it roughly. And then I have 1 carrot and 3 celery stalks. Here's the thing about the celery stalks. If you want to use more of them or less of them, you want to use more carrots, you can certainly do that. If you don't like celery, you use something else, any kind of pepper you want. So that's the thing about this recipe. It's so versatile. You can switch it up. All right, so I'm going to make some noise. I'm going to put I forgot to put my, garlic cloves in there. And you can see the consistency. That's kind of what you want to get. If you notice, I didn't put my beans in there because you don't want this to be like baby food mush. You want it to have some texture to it. So I'm going to bring some of this back over here. Oh, and I thought I had my onions in there, so let's just go ahead and throw those in there before I add my beans. Okay, I'm flustered. Here we go. Okay, that's perfect. That's how you want it. So then we'll add the chickpeas. I have 1.5 cups, a can of chickpeas.
Hey, Kim, did you add the onions?
I did. I put the onion in just now because I forgot to put it in when I was doing the vegetables because I got flustered because of the internet. But you know what? This recipe, you can't really mess it up. You can't go wrong. So it was a good night to have this happen, I guess. Here we go. All right. I like that consistency. It's perfect. So you can kind of see, I'm going to move this. You can kind of see what we've got. And in the cookbook, I had you sautéing and chopping all of the vegetables. Well, I just don't think you need to do that. This is really easy. So we're going to add this to the dry mixture. Oops. And I think a food processor is so important to have a really good one if you're plant-based. A food processor and a really nice blender. You can get all the other stuff, the bells and whistles. You can get, air fryers and instant pots, but I think a food processor and a good blender is key when you're getting started. All right, so then we're going to just mix this around a little bit. We've got some more ingredients. We've got some seasonings that we want to add to it. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Chili powder is not spicy, by the way. It's very mild. And then we have a teaspoon of oregano. Fresh is always better, but I just used dried tonight. And then 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. That's another one of those condiments that's in Miyoko Shinner's book. I always say it wrong, so I probably said it wrong. A little bit of salt and pepper, or not, if you're not using salt and pepper. And then mix it all up. And now you want to add that flax meal. I want you to see how goopy it is. See how goopy it is? I just think this is what really holds it together. It's your egg replacer. And you could put your hands in here if you want. You could add parsley to this. You could add chopped spinach. You could add kale. I'd be really careful about adding too many more vegetables than what's in here because you don't want it to get too wet. And this makes a lot. I think you could make veggie patties with it. You could make meatballs, veggie balls with it. And you can make a lot ahead of time. We made this with the beach, and I think we had like 14 people at the beach house. It's just, the longer it sits in the refrigerator, the better it tastes, because the flavors kind of meld and come together really nicely. Do we have people on now, Nelson? People picked up where we left off?
We still seem to be having a few issues. The link is posted there, which should work. But we had something, this never happened before, but our internet here basically crashed. I don't know why. We have high-speed internet here, but not sure what happened. We'll have to figure it out after the show.
Okay, so I'm going to take a loaf pan, and I always line my loaf pans with parchment paper. You know, you can just put it in like that, or you can use a silicone pan, or you can put these in silicone muffin pans. You know, you can make like little breakfast muffins with them. What's that? Okay. This makes a pretty big loaf too. It easily feeds, I think, 6 people nicely. The other thing you could do, if you wanted to free-form it, you could put it on top of a cookie sheet and just form it with your hands. You don't even have to put it in anything. That'll work nicely. And then, oops, put that over there. Push it down in there really, really hard, because you want to get it nice and compact. And then, if you just want to end there and just put bone-sucking sauce on it, or a little bit of ketchup, or you just want to leave it plain, you can do that. But I'm going to put a little bit of the sauce that I made on top. I think the sauce makes it.
Someone's asking, Kim, you did put the chickpeas in, right?
I did put the chickpeas in. What I did is I processed the vegetables really, pretty fine, and then I added the chickpeas because I didn't want to get hummus. So I did put that in there. And then I should have told you to preheat your oven at 375 degrees. So you want to cook it between 375 and 400. I always leave a little bit extra for when you serve it. So we'll go ahead and stick this in the oven. There. Oops. All right, so here is a really fun Thanksgiving kind of dinner, I think. It's comfort food. So I have some mashed potatoes. I'm going to put some gravy on it. And if you're looking, you're probably saying, why are your mashed potatoes orange? When I make, they're smashed potatoes, but when I make mashed potatoes, I put things in it. I sometimes put, last night I put parsnips in it. I love parsnips. I had carrots, extra carrots, so I just threw some carrots in the water that I was boiling. And then we're going to put gravy. I have a really beautiful mushroom gravy.
Hey, Kim.
Yeah.
Someone's asking whether it would be a good idea to put the beanie loaf in the fridge for better flavor before cooking.
Yes, this actually went in the fridge and it's cooked. But it, you know, you can eat it right out of the oven either way, but I think it holds together a little bit better. The picture that I put online was right out of the oven, so okay, we'll put a couple slices on. Oops, I'm trying to make it look pretty for the picture. Put it on like that. And then if you have a little extra sauce left over, you can drizzle it over the top. I think this is actually one of my favorite winter dishes because it's easy, it's traditional, and this we're kind of dancing into the Thanksgiving area. So Next week we're doing sweet and sour vegetables with soy curls. It's a stir fry. It's real simple. I tried to do something simple next week because Dr. Campbell will be with us. So if you are just joining now, Dr. Campbell's coming down to do videotape a course that he's going to be offering. So he will be here on Thursday. So I'm going to cook a little, but I'm going to let him answer all of your pressing questions. So invite your friends to come along and cook with me, or just ask Dr. Campbell questions because he loves to talk about nutrition. So anything else, Nelson?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about the tech difficulties, and we will see you back here next week at 6:30 on Thursday night. Have a great weekend.